We are really happy to have with us today Dr. Guy Diamond. This is part of our series with senior faculty. Our fall series is really focused on funding strategies and approaches to funding. And we are honored and grateful that Dr. Diamond can join us. His funding is unprecedented, so I think there are several lessons for all of us to learn here. And I'll do a brief intro, then Dr. Diamond will speak for about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we'll leave about 15, 20 minutes for questions in the end. So be sure to bring them along. So for a brief introduction, Dr. Guy Diamond is an associate professor in the Department of Counseling and Family Therapy in the College of Nursing and Health Professions at Drexel University, and the director of the Center for Family Intervention Science. He is a family intervention clinical trials researcher with a focus on family therapy for youth suicide. Since its inception, CFIS has been fully funded with up to 22 staff and has brought in over $30 million of funding from the NIMH, SAMSHA, CDC, CSAT. I don't know what CSAT is.
Substance abuse treatment.
And several private foundations. CFIS is dedicated to the development, testing, and dissemination of family-based treatments for diverse samples of depressed and suicidal youth and their parents. In this capacity, he has overseen the design, implementation, and dissemination of over 15 clinical trial studies. Dr. Diamond's primary work has been in the area of youth suicide prevention and treatment research. On the prevention side, he has created a program focused on training, screening, and triage to be implemented in non-behavioral health settings. On the treatment side, Dr. Diamond is the primary developer of attachment-based family therapy, specially developed and tested for treating youth depression and suicide. Most of his research career has focused on working with low-income, disadvantaged youth and families. So welcome, Dr. Diamond. We look forward to hearing about your journey.
Thank you.
How you built your scholarly life, so to speak.
Yeah. Hey, well, thanks for having me. It's always fun to reflect back on one's professional journey a bit. So I'll do a little extemporaneous thinking about things. But I actually thought I would start with the takeaways, just in case some of you drop off halfway through to something like this. I think so here's a couple, not pearls of wisdom, but guidelines I would recommend as one's thinking about. The first thing I would say to most people that want to be a researcher is don't do it. It is a tough road to climb. It is a very particular lifestyle to live. It's a hard world to break into if you don't have the pedigree behind you of, going to school at Yale and, doing a postdoc at NIH. I mean, it's not as easy as it looks or from the outside. So I think seriously about it. My cynical recommendation. An alternative, and that is really, one thing I think a lot of people decide in the research world is, do I want to be the PI or do I want to work in a research environment? So I have 10 people working for me on various grants now. None of them will ever be the PI of their own grant. It's just not what they want to do. They don't want to, this Monday night, we were up till 2 a.m, trying to finalize an application that was due at 6 a.m. And so, it's a harder road to be the PI. It's exciting. And you're constantly doing what you love the most and thinking, wow, this is a cool idea. I wonder if this would work. And then you go write a grant and then you spend 2 years doing it and then you write it up and you publish it. So a lot of my time is spent creating my career. I wake up every morning and feel like if I don't do the next thing, this enterprise will not continue. It's up to me to keep what's my next horizon, what's my next grant, who's my next partner, where am I headed, and I kind of love it. I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie and a little ADHD at the same time, so I kind of like the chaos of deadlines and a lot of things to do and running different things. And but all my staff, I couldn't do it without my staff. They look at me and think I'm nuts, and but I have one staff person runs one project to move this things forward, gets these things done. And working in a research environment is really exciting. It's really, I think people like the sense of project. It's, the sense of we came up with something, we're going to try something, it's going to last for a year, we're going to try to evaluate it. And it kind of has an ending to it. I don't know how many, in my world, I'm a psychotherapist in my day job, if you want to say that. And the idea of sitting in a practice, seeing patients all day, it's very satisfying. I love the patient contact. But there's no end in sight. There's no project. There's no mission to it. Each case is a mission, and I'm trying to help. But I think that's one of the things I love about research. It's organized by task, not by clock. It's like and people work hard to get something done, and then they take time off if need to recover and go to the bank and get their laundry done. So it has a lot, as a career life, it has a lot more control, a lot more flexibility, and we just love the creativity of it. And so I think being in a research environment can be just as satisfying as trying to be the PI in a research environment, and without a lot of the headaches. So that's one thing I always coach my mentees around. Another thing I often say to them is when you're young, career wise, you got to pick a focus. You can't have 5 different topics going on. It's too hard to keep too many agendas moving forward. I got this project, and then I got something over here in the economics department, and then I got it's too hard to do multiple things. When you have multiple topics going, you got to keep up on multiple literature. I'm guilty myself. We have a whole system for doing screening in non-behavioral health centers. Maybe I'll talk about it in a few minutes, and it travels. We're in schools, we're in health centers, we're in emergency rooms. I'm writing a grant now to put this screening system into the Veterans Administration Affairs program across Pennsylvania. There's 67 Veterans Affairs offices. They see vets all the time, 200-300 of them. Half of them need mental health services. We're going to give them this system to help improve their screening, identification, referral. But the reason I bring that up is I'm suddenly I have to master the literature on suicide in Army vets, and for me, that can now, I can move my program to a variety of populations. But I think in the beginning, that's hard. And I recommend picking a population, picking a problem, sticking with it. And particularly, unfortunately, publications are critical in one's early career. And one publishes a lot more when they're focused on a particular topic. And First, I'm going to talk to parents about inpatient experience. Then I'm going to talk to social workers about the inpatient experience. And then I'm going to interview kids about their inpatient experience. And then I'm going to do an intervention about the inpatient experience. And then I'm going to follow kids about the inpatient experience so that the problem I'm trying to solve, how to improve aftercare, it's one of the lines of work that we're doing when kids come out of hospital after a suicide attempt, can be dismantled in so many ways. There's so many little pieces of that, and a paper can be written about each of those pieces. So when one has a bit of a focus, one has a direction, you can be more productive. You have a team of people. Someone's going to do the study with the parents, and someone's going to do the study with the kids, and you're going to work together, and you'll get 2 papers done. So there's definitely some, value in being step by step, systematic. Using the lit review from one paper to inform the lit review for another paper. I now have a method section that I because I'm doing screening regardless of the population. I hope I'm not being too vague about any of this, but I just move my method section from one grant to the next, because in each study I'm doing the same thing. It's a different population, but I'm doing screening. So here's screening, here's how we implement it, here's how we evaluate it. So I'm able to capitalize on the work that I do to help me be more productive. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. Somebody nod their head at me.
Yeah. I mean, and I was going to tell people, if you want to switch on your videos, that I wasn't sure what you see, Guy, because you're pinned.
I just see me.
Okay, we're all listening. We're listening intently.
I'm happy that there's a small enough group of people.
Yeah. If you all want to switch
nice
on.
to see some heads nodding, so I think I'm making some sense to
Absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing your strategy. And I think we'll have questions later, but we are listening intently.
So 2 other things strategically, I'd say. It is really hard to do research on your own. Mm-hmm. And the way to create a research career is to get in a research shop. As a young person, things will move along. And this is the way NIH sees it and the way other funding. You're not on your own in a department somewhere in an office writing your little thing. You're ideally in some research center where there's 3 other people doing this kind of work and 2 other postdocs in the same shop, and we all meet together and we all help each other and we collaborate on papers. We have a writing group that meets weekly, and we have 4 papers going at any one time. Someone says, "Oh, I'm interested in the LGBT population in the residential facility. Okay, I'll write the LGBT paper." Someone else is going to write the suicide risk assessment paper, and then 4 people lead, and all of us are on all the papers. Someone writes the lit review, someone does a data analysis, and so again, it's a kind of team effort to move the research enterprise forward. I think that really helps. There's 2 things in that. One is, but I think as a junior person, writing this is just the pragmatic realities, riding the coattails of a more senior person just makes your life so much easier. I didn't have that. I was at Penn. It was a place called the Philadelphia Child Guidance Center. I'd come from a research shop in my graduate training, and then I got here, and I had to do it all on my own. I had to write the grants myself, and had to get, and it was just hard. Whereas people I know who worked in Lester Laborski's lab, they were put on this grant, and then they were put on that grant, and then they got 5 publications from this project, and then they wrote their own grant. And research is an enterprise. and the more you're situated in a lab doing the kind of work you want to do, the more likely you are to have success. And when you go to write NIH grants, it's definitely one of the things they look for. What's your context? Are you all alone in Ontario trying to do this work, or are you at Cincinnati Children's Hospital where there's a statistics department and a research laboratories? And it's not to say you can't, but it's an easier road if you can find a lab to be part of. Another thing I would say, and this is challenging, is networking is a key feature in one's professional development. I fortunately had 4 children. I bless every day of it. But I had them at the beginning of my career. And when I said to my wife, "Oh, I'm going to go to the conference in Milwaukee," she would look at me like, "Oh, no, you're not going anywhere. I'm getting the day off. I've been home all anyway." That any of you were having kids and that. So in the first couple years, a lot of years of my life, I stayed home and was dad and loved it. But I missed out on a lot of networking. And I think going to conferences, meeting colleagues in your field, getting known, it's just not a small piece of how a research career moves forward. Because you go up after the talk and you introduce yourself and blah, blah, blah. And then next month that guy says, "Oh, I need someone to write a chapter for me." And I remember that Rebecca woman, she's doing that work. And he calls you and says, "Would you like to write a chapter?" And then suddenly you're in the company of leaders in the field, and someone else calls you and says, "Hey, I need an expert on my grant who does the kind of work you do." And it's not a small aspect of evolving one's career. And certainly different people have different stories, but I think it's a valuable thing to try to put some energy into the whole networking within your scientific community. All right, those are my gems. I'm done. Say something. Girjia, is any of that helpful?
Yes, it is. I have a whole bunch of questions.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk more on my personal journey, or we could just stop here and open it up.
Do folks have questions right now, or should we have Dr. Diamond speak?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about these things and where you guys are at in your journey and what you do, and does any of the things I'm saying resonate with the challenges that you're having?
All right, I'll hold off. Any comments, questions from any of you right now? Jacelyn?
Hi, Dr. Diamond.
Hi.
I guess when you were like, "Don't do it," I was like, yeah, I'm really resonating with that right now. I want to do it and I can't do it. So maybe just don't do it is the way to go. But I guess, I have this common issue, and other DMTs, dance therapists, will probably identify with the fact that there aren't a lot of mentors for us in our specific field. And I know that, I came into the PhD program and kind of wanting to be one of those people that was going to be doing the research. But I guess getting your foot in the door is something that has been a continued struggle. So when you say you don't have to be the PI, but you can join like a research team, that's something that I'm interested in as well. And I guess if you could just speak to any tips around, I know networking is part of the way to find these folks, but I'm a dance movement therapist with a specialization in working with people with acute schizophrenia. So I'm kind of shot myself in both feet with that, because there are no dance therapy researchers. And all of the schizophrenia research is psychopharmacological, and that's not what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So I guess just like maybe any ways of thinking outside of the box to get your foot in the door around joining some type of team would be helpful if you have anything.
Well, let me say this first, and though I have not met with Yoka and Girjia for a long time, I love the creative arts research work that you guys are doing, and think it is so potentially so innovative and such a creative area to be in, that I think there's unique opportunities in how marginalized we are in this. The fact that there's so little of it actually creates opportunities, I think. I do think, and I shouldn't be advised, Girjia knows this world much better than I, but I do think the road in for you guys is through biomarker research. That the creative thing you have to offer is, we are activating physiology. It's not sitting at home doing psychotherapy, talk therapy. We're getting people moving. We're activating different parts of the brain. And I know Girjia and Yoka have capitalized on this some, and I think it's a way of bringing science into what most people think is a total mush activity, but saying, we think there's a unique pathway here. And I know Girjia and Yoka have done really good jobs at maximizing that. So I'd be learning, PET scans, or, I think that's one way in. I don't know, Girjia, what you'd say, but it's going to be hard to get a randomized clinical trial of dance therapy versus journaling. That's not going to happen. So, but to say we want to compare whether dance movement changes biorhythms in ways that painting doesn't, or ways of psychotherapy doesn't, given where NIH is at, their interest in core mechanisms rather than symptom outcome, I think that's an exciting opportunity.
Rebecca? Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for that. I agree with that. However, I'm also a dance movement therapist and third year postdoctoral research fellow. And I have already contacted so many people, and everybody's telling me that I don't have enough experience, with neuroimaging or any of these techniques, and that they don't have time to train me.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of stuck, because that's really interesting to me as well, but I can't go back to the beginning and learn it all, because it just takes too long. And so the question is, how do you find somebody who is willing to sort of take you along, provide what you're doing, and then do that work? That is really where I'm struggling.
I know. I mean, again, I'm sure Girjia thinks about this all day long. What comes to mind right away is about partnering with somebody. Not would you teach me to do it myself, but to find somebody who does it and say, hey, I have 2,500 schizophrenics who are dancing in my studio, and you know how to do biomarkers. Would you like to partner? I'll bring the population, you bring the technology, and we could do some. One thing those bio folks don't have is access to clinical settings. Girjia, who's the guy in engineering that does the head?
Hassan Ayaz.
Yeah. I mean, he came to me because I had suicidal kids. And he says, I don't have suicide kids. I don't have an inpatient unit that wants to work with me. You do. Let's do a study together. I never learned a thing about the technology. And we wrote 3 papers together and got 2 grants. So that it might be a way to, one strategy for, so I'd be going to neuroscience conferences, and at the end, I'd be finding the young, hungry assistant professor, not the senior guy who's already got 8 grants and is already doing, systematic this and that on some gene type this. The young guy who's creative, who's hungry, who's looking for direction, and say, hey, I got a population. We could strap your tool on these people. You want to write a grant together? That's pie in the sky, maybe. I don't want to give some illusion that it's so easy, but that'd be one thing to think about. You don't have to have the neuroscience skills. You could bring the population. And in that regard, I know Kate
Kaufman,
Kate Kaufman, who was one of your graduates, she has gotten involved with a large clinical environment. And the same thing, she's now got access to the patients. And, she happened to reach out to me because I'm involved with the same organization. But so she had to go look for clinical opportunities. And now she has that as a bargaining chip, as a marketing tool. So anyway, I don't know if that makes any sense with that region.
And I appreciate you saying that, Guy, because I think that's a shift in framing, right? So instead of approaching it as, well, I don't have this, what do I bring to the table? And in my collaborations with biomed and neuroscience people, very often they don't have any clinical training or experience. Right. So what we can offer really is things to look for. So what are things we see clinically in behavior and responses in the kinds of outcomes we want to see? And then they help us see what is, what are brain signatures we can look for or networks we can look for. But I think that's a really, really important point, that we remember what we bring to the table, which is, the access to clinical populations and a clinical understanding of human behavior, human functioning that most of the tech people have no idea about. So this is something I've heard other senior scholars say too, sort of really identify what you bring to the table. And a lot of people want to partner, but they just don't know how to. So and it's hard. I think I've worked with people that I don't want to work with ever again. And that was that. But there's always, it takes a while. It takes a while to find the person who's willing to bridge and is curious enough to work together. If someone's very discipline bound, they are probably not the right partner for you. It has to be someone who has some curiosity and interest. And Hassan is actually a great example of that. He works across so many disciplines and brings his tech to, like, all the way from pilots to like suicidal youth, like he does. So I think recognizing what you bring to the table, there's new funding sources, there's opportunities in the DoD, there's opportunities in the NEA. I know, Guy, you used to say you have to apply to 15 to get one. And Dr. Diamond has 30 million plus of funding. So I know you say don't do it, but
I've applied to 90 million.
But that's part of this game, right? So we sort of have to take that rejection and stride and have a strategy. Like, I have a whole checklist of strategies for all the rejections that are definitely going to come. But along with those, 10 rejections, there'll be 1 or 2 acceptances, and you build from that.
You have to have tough skin in this business.
But take questions. Anything else?
Right. Who else is Laura? Are most of you in the dance therapy world, or are you all across the college? Laura, Olivia, what department are you guys in?
I'm actually in CCI, so I'm not nursing at all.
Okay.
I'm in nutrition.
In nutrition.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, there's a lot going on in that domain, right? That's a burgeoning, growing. And Banny, where are you? What department are you?
Creative arts. Dr.
Oh, you're
Ram is
creative.
my advisor, art therapy. I do have a question. I know I'm just a doctoral student right now, but I keep hearing everybody's stories, and I'm really curious. How important do you think is the first job after doctoral or postdoc? And that keeps running in my head a lot. So I just wondered what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it makes or breaks you, like your first job defines who you are. There's definitely, you have to put together, if you want to go after grants, and that's kind of the constant framework here we're talking about, be a researcher, you have to have a story about your life. I don't know if any of you, like for your college essay, you had to write a story that made it sound like everything in your life leads up to this application to Sarah Lawrence. I mean, I did this, and then I learned that, and I did this, and it led me to this, and it led me, which we all know is a bunch of crap, and everybody's making it up. But in the research world, they look for a story. I worked with this population. I got kind of interested, and then I did this, and I wrote 2 papers while I was there, and then So I think there is something, if you're all over the map, they get a little more worried. The research world's very conservative. They do not like creativity. I'm always telling my staff, be simple, take that hypothesis out. As creative and fantastic as it is, the reviewers will jump all over it. There's not enough data to support it. You don't have a lit review about it. We had the last study we wrote, in this sample we're in this psychiatric setting, we have kids. I'm going on a tangent here, Bonnie, but we have kids 12 to 24. And she's saying, okay, we're going to use kids 12 to 24. And I said, why are we putting in the adolescents, the young adults? Because they're there, and it's a lot of them. I'm like, no, take it out. Reviewers are going to slam you for not being developmentally sensitive. I've had grants reviewed where I'm doing 12 to 18-year-olds, and people come back and say, how can you put both that whole age group in the same study? You should be doing 12 to 15 or 15 or 16 to 9. Like, it's very conservative, systematic. So I don't think the first job is so defining. I would say, maybe this was Girjia's point, there are some jobs that are better than others that will move your career forward, even though there may not be the ideal or the most money. And money's definitely a factor. I took many a job at less pay because I felt like this is going to excite me. It's what I want to do. I mean, even being a researcher, most of my colleagues are out in private practice making, twice what I make, sitting in their office talking to unhappy people all day. I'm here up till 4 a.m, 6 nights a week, and trying to this and that, and I'm making peanuts, not paid well. But academia is not I was on a plane once. This is total tangent, but I'm on a plane. My family and I have to sit apart because we couldn't get seats together, and I sit next to this high-powered Philadelphia lawyer, and we're chatting about her work. And she says, "So what do you do?" I said, "I'm a professor. I was at Penn at the time. Thought that would sound impressive." She says, "A professor? So who makes the money in your family?" Thanks a lot, as I shrivel in my seat. So it's a good life. There's a lot of flexibility, creativity. You're not going to buy a house on the beach with that alone. So make sure your partner's a banker or something. What else? Anything? I don't know if Girjia, this is how you wanted this to go, or
No,
what?
this is really exactly what we wanted, and
Okay.
this is an opportunity for all our research staff, postdocs, really to hear different perspectives, and everyone has a slightly different
Yeah.
journey. I would love if we have about 15 minutes. If you could share a little bit more about how you came to choose your area. So you said, focus on a few things. How did you decide
Yeah.
on what to focus on?
Yeah. So again, if I was writing my, college application, I'd have this elegant story of how it was all planned out, and every step of the way was systematic. And the truth is, it's what door did you open on a Tuesday afternoon, and who did you meet, and what grant opportunity came along, and there's a lot of happenstance in one's career, but there's definitely a thread. I thought I was going to be a rabbi, and went to rabbinical school, and there's a whole history before that I won't get into, but ended up not liking that and came back to psychology. I'd grown up in a psychology family, and ended up doing a master's degree in family therapy, actually. And in one, this is how your life turns on a dime. This is my little, story that a professor of mine got a grant. He got a NIDA grant to do couples therapy with heroin addicts in a methadone. And this is what you saw in all the videotapes in the classes of Sal Minuchin working with the ADHD kid, this and that. I'd never done research. I was barely learning how to be a therapist, and I just came up to him after class and said, "Wow, it's a pretty cool project you have. Do you need any help?" And my life just turned on a dime. He said, "Well, as a matter of fact, for a research assistant, if you're interested in," and I fell in love with research. It was a small grant, so I got to do everything. I did the diagnostic assessments, I did the data entry, I did the recruitment, and I'm a young pup driving around my car, stopping heroin addicts in the Mission District of San Francisco. Johnny, remember me? Yeah, come here, sit in my car. I got to get the follow-up assessment from you. I'll give you $20. And, collected 100 of those, really driving the neighborhoods to stop. So I kind of fell in love with research at that point, and from there moved to another study on substance use. Then when I did then these are all family therapy, so that thread had stayed. But when I got to my internship in psychology, you got to do a year-long training. I'm on this inpatient unit. I'm surrounded by depressed teenagers. And I said, geez, I might as well, this is what's in front of me. I might as well use my skills from my substance abuse world and start to look at depressed kids. So we started doing that. I got a couple small grants. I actually didn't say that. I started out with my first grant was $5,000 from the Oklahoma Home for the Helpless. It was like I scoured the world of grant and foundation funding and just tried to look for little tiny, whatever I could get to. Money gets money. And when you go to ask for $1 million, they say, well, what's your track record? What have you? I'll come back to that. Well, the other thing they look for, I always say this, and this is an NIH review. They want to see that you published your dissertation. Every review committee says, wait a minute, I don't see they started a study, they spent 2 years collecting data, and they never published it. I'm not giving them $1 million. That doesn't bode well for someone who can start something, carry it through, and bring it to completion. And I was just amazed how often So I recommend you publish it. Anyway, I'm doing depression work. A grant announcement comes out about suicide. And I'm thinking, hey, I got all these depressed kids. Half of them are suicidal. Okay, I'll do suicide now. And that I've been doing that 15 years. So a lot of it was where I was, what was in front of me, circumstances, opportunity, mentorship. I'd like to sound like I was much more thoughtful and, really planned it all out and was going to save the world. But there's a little bit of opportunistic kind of. So that's a short answer.
This is a theme we've been hearing from several of the speakers. There's a piece of planning, and then there's serendipity, right? Finding the right mentor, finding the right opportunity, and then sort of things click into place. And as we are hearing you today, and I really appreciate your being candid, what are you willing to tolerate, right? Like, what struggles are you willing to tolerate to do the things you love to do? Because it's hard being a clinician too, and I bet that lawyer was plenty miserable in other aspects other than money. So money is kind of figuring out the balance of what is a good life for you.
Yeah.
And that includes, right, what is your poison? What are some things you're willing to tolerate?
Yeah.
80% of the time, you feel fulfilled.
Yeah. On that note, I'm in the family therapy department.
Mm-hmm.
Family therapists have the same problem. They're not trained well as research scientists. There's very few mentors in the family therapy world moving them forward as research scientists. It's just not a science-oriented profession. It's a practice profession. And I've told some people, and one did it. I said, look, I know you have your PhD, but I'd go apply for the research assistant job and go to them and say, look, I know I have a PhD and I should be the project coordinator, but I know I don't have the skills, but I'll take the research assistant job at $45,000 for 2 years. If at the end of that, you still don't want me for the coordinator, that's fine, but I'll take it as a kind of a postdoc mentorship. Get me on the grant. I'll show you what I'm capable of, and I'll learn everything I can while I'm there. And I've had one person do that, and they are now at Penn, and they're in a research lab as a project coordinator. And they're not going to be a PI, but they had good organizational skills. That's being a researcher is about, you have to have a dose of obsessive compulsiveness, which I don't have, so I hire people that do.
Obsessed, yes. Yep.
I saw Lisa Chorella was on this slide. She could tell you, she and I work together. It's not my strength. I'm great at ideas and inspiring people, but I'm not. Give me a list of tasks. That's my ADHD clicks in a list of tasks. I've gotten better at it. But,
Yeah. One thing we of note with you is that you have this team that you've managed for a really long time. You've had people who've been with you for a really long time. Could you give us some insights, ideas around how to manage people, your some sort of management strategies?
I mean, there's a couple things to say. I think I create a pretty comfortable work environment. I'm pretty trusting of people, believe in the best in them. And so I think people like working for me. It's not a competitive backstabbing, So I think some of it's my style of people. I do think I'm very invested in people's growth. And I do a lot of mentoring, even if it means they're going to leave me. Most of my master's level or BA level people, I tell them, if you're here in 3 years, I have failed. You got to be off to graduate school. I mean, assuming they're on that kind of. So we need to be thinking, so in that regard, I'm used to a kind of turnover at the entry level and want it. But I have had a couple. I have a couple people who stayed a long time. Suzanne Levy, Tita Ate. They are my pillars. I couldn't operate without them. And,
right. We have a few more minutes. Any final questions? Lots to think about. Really appreciate our conversation today. Any final questions?
I did have one last thing to say, particularly for the creative arts people. And Yoka and I used to talk about this a lot, and maybe in this new era of joint programming. There is a research methodology called process research that I think has a lot of potential for creative arts therapy to help bring a little more, not manualization, but structure. And, I think you could do some interesting research, in a dance therapy environment. It's about isolating particular events or things that you like. Today, we're going to try to focus on this thing, and I'm going to get 10 cases that focus on this thing. We're going to try to study those 10 cases and videotape them and code them. And that I've always thought creative arts could benefit from. So maybe there's conversations for us to have.
Great. Thank you. I just wrote that down. I'm going to check it out too.
Yeah.
Okay. We are at time. If there is nothing else, anything else, anyone else? Thank you very much. We are really grateful. Lots to think about today. So thank you so much for joining us. And hope to see you all in corridors somewhere on campus. All
okay,
right.
bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye for now.